I got to tell you, for the Halloween show, I shaved my arms, the upper arms, because I'm so hairy. And it's very itchy now. I'm dying. I'm fucking dying.
My cat had surgery earlier this week, and they had to shave a very large patch of skin from the side of his body. And his stubble started coming in today. I can imagine that you both feel the same way.
Yeah, well, boy, yeah, it's just a weird thing to have itchy arms, or to think about shaving your arms because you have so much hair. But this is the way it is.
Is it cold? Like, do you feel extra cold this winter because of your shaved arms?
No, not at all.
I'm assuming you wear a jacket as well, but
yeah, but I don't feel any colder. I don't feel any colder. It's itchy. I mean, it reminds me that's it.
It's the OS way. Beauty is itchy.
School. That's right. I bet you that bastard shaves all the time.
That's how you keep from being itchy.
Big time. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess I could just, boy.
Hey, shout out to Big Time Tommy. Big Time Tommy, if you're listening, do you shave your arms all the time? And how often do you? How do you keep from being itchy? I bet you exfoliating your skin will help you prevent extra itchiness as your hair grows back. So perhaps using a loofah or some sort of textured washcloth when you take a shower will help. You can mix a little bit of sugar with olive oil and rub your arms with it as a homemade sugar scrub, which both moisturizes your skin as well as exfoliates the little gunks out of your hair follicles. And you can enjoy the process of growing your hair back.
Nice. I'm going to do the sugar scrub. I love that.
That's a little tip from Nannerl here at Speak of the Devil Pod.
Yeah, a cult tip right there. It's a cult secret.
Cult tip for preventing itchiness and having a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
So today, we're going to be talking about a rather obscure but important book in underground art history, which really anyone who is into anything independent, underground, edgy, the list goes on. If you've ever been called an edgelord, you probably should look at this book at least once. This book is called Art That Kills. Whoops. Art That Kills. It was released a very long time ago. It was put together, written by George Petros, but it was not solely written by him, of course, because a lot of the book has direct quotes and interviews from the artists, and so you get a lot of really good glimpses into their lives from the horses' mouths. And mine was published in 2010, but I believe mine is a second edition.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine. I'm seeing if mine was published. I don't know. Let me see. I know mine's different than yours. 2006, mine says.
Alrighty. So I believe you have the first edition. I have the second edition. Okay. Does yours have a cat on the copyright date?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they did not change anything. Okay. So mine is the re-release. Shane, of course, has the OG because he is one of the OGs in this book. In fact, if you are just interested in getting this book or finding this book at a library that was willing to carry it, and you just want to look at Shane and see 90s Shane kind of looking like Billie Eilish, you can flip over to page 286. And actually, he gets quite a healthy helping of coverage in this compared to a lot of these artists who only got like one page of like a full spread photo and then 1 page of an article. Some people got 1.5, but the first photo is fantastic. It's just fantastic. And then they've got naked aggression on the next page, and then actually our Trenchcoat Diaries has its cover on page 288, which is both problematic because of the number, but also very, very fantastic that it ties into what we have previously recorded. And then the next page over, we've got a letter that Mike Diana gave to Shane with a photo next to Shane and Mike in happier times, next to Dana Plato's last breath, which we have also talked about. And then on the next page, we've got actually a really good segue into some of these other artists, which is a flyer for Expo to the Extreme. And it says Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. See boy Billie Eilish at Expo to the Extreme.
Oh, goodness.
So, and then finally the last one, I see a page that says porno, vomiting art. Jerry Springer has nothing on us. It looks like this is a flyer for the Angry White Male Tour, which also is a good... Actually, these two pages 290 and 291, are really good pages to start with, because some of the other artists that we're going to just brush by today are in here, and maybe they should get this book and remember who has touched base with them too. Remember that they are on Shane's flyers too. Who knows? A quick content warning to our listeners. We do cover a lot of adult content generally, but this one kicks it up a notch. This is a book that has collections of art and free thought from 1984 until 2004, and 1984 to 2001. I'm really on a roll today. And a lot of this includes incredibly deviant acts and literature and artwork that is influenced by the idea of very deviant acts. And some of them, while they are not necessarily taking action on these deviant acts, can be seen as problematic, if not illegal. And there's a cliche on Reddit called "Open Up FBI," and people put a lot of, sometimes it's accidental posts people put about how good looking their child is or something, and it's a little creepy what they said. So like the idea of knocking on a wall and saying "FBI, open up." And there's a lot of that in this. There's a lot of very extreme sexuality, political thought, and do keep in mind, this is all artistic expression, and the true intent of the majority of the artists in this book are for artistic expression, and expression includes ugly thoughts as well as, pretty flowers.
Oh yeah, I think this is the last time you'd see something like this, especially because it's pre-internet. It's as the internet's coming to fruit. And I noticed last night, a couple things. I remember George telling me, so hard to fit you in because you have so much stuff, Shane. And I thought when I looked at it, there's so many people mention might is right throughout the book. So many times it's mentioned, it feels like almost every other page, but he doesn't bring up that I published it for the longest time. So I thought that was wild. But I also thought the other thing I noticed was that it goes in order of like the oldest to the youngest. It ends at the youngest. And so I'm at towards the end because I'm younger, and I started going, man, I don't know this person. Or like Lydia Lunch, I was a fan of, for a moment. Anyway, those are the couple things I noticed. But yeah, it's extreme, but I don't think you'll ever see this again because we have the internet now, and like all those extremities are out there if you want to find them, but also people self-censor so much because we're in a transparent society now. That was us communicating in a bubble with other extremists, underground, so we felt pretty safe talking about these things amongst ourselves. And it's pretty much like until the internet, you didn't get the feedback from the whole of society, like saying like, hey, that hurts my feelings, or hey, you don't know my story. You don't know what I've gone through. And this is my experience. And then you're like, oh, wow. And your art sort of changes, at least mine did. And so, that's how I see this book when I looked it over last night. But I also see it as artwork of prophecy. Like this is a reflection of the baby boomers. This is our parents, the baby boomers, handed us their pain and misery, their anger. And so what you see in this book is reverberating to this day through the Trump stuff, where it's like, holy shit, like you see the alt-right, you see all this stuff like that. We talk about the Gilmore shooting with Might Is Right, in Columbine, the stuff that, like, that's the show we just did. Like that stuff all comes from this art movement inspired those kids to shoot the schools. We talked about it. They did it. So it's like, so there is this heavy thing for myself when I think about that. I'm like, wow, we did inspire a lot of stuff. And today, just like when I spoke of in past shows, when we spoke about Might Is Right, when I took it off sale, because I got so many emails about people saying that was great. Now we're in charge. You influenced this, or thanks for putting that book out. I was like, holy shit, you got the wrong idea. And you did, most of the people in this book were invisible. We're part of an invisible zip code. We're underground. No one's paying attention to us. Just ourselves, just a bunch of angry, like you said, edgelords. So that's heavy to think that this is the baby boomers' rage given to their children as this curse. And then we project it out as artwork trying to understand it. And I think that's what I see in myself, at least. And I see that in a great number of people in this book. Like Marilyn Manson, for instance, he's projecting what he grew up around in Florida. He took it in and he shit it out in art. He shit it out on you. And that's what I see. Some of these people, though, are of upper zip code or college educated, and they understand their political ideals. So when they're into the fascism stuff, they understand what that is. Like they get it. And how I see that, like fascism to me is a bunch of scared people. Control is about being afraid. And courage is about no control, not controlling people. You have courage, you have trust, you have these things that are going on. You're courageous. You can trust this person and you're ready. If they hurt you, you're ready for a fight, let's say. So you're brave when you lack that need to control everyone around you, and you're fearful when you need to control people. And so like this is the abused people. These are the kids who were picked on, I think, a lot of times. And that's where some of the people that had political ideals of fascism, I think that's where they're coming from. They're really afraid, and they're showing it in this educated political theory way. And then some of us are just using shit for shock value, just to go, hey, or we're experimenting, or we're bringing it from our fathers, because, we're all racist. And, if you're white, you're probably, like I heard the theory recently that you're racist if you're white, no matter if you understand it or not. And that's still a concept I'm trying to absorb. But I think that's true. The baby boomers gave us this racism and stuff like that. So when we're exploring it in art, that's what it is. It's a naivete. That's what I see in this book. I see most people are naive, and then some people are very educated, upper class, and they're looking to really they have a power in their education where they can do real damage, and they want to. Like
mad scientists of academics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I would like to start off with this about the idea of exploring childhood, exploring thought that was, I guess, kind of angry white kids processing what their parents fed them. In a way, this book is the first OK Boomer.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't realize it. I don't think we realized it.
Of course not. But kids, here's another reason you should probably look at it before you look at all these hype beasts, all these YouTube, not influencers, but these YouTube artists who seem extreme or individual or different. Things like even DeAntword would not be around without this, or, all
no.
these other artists. And, Marilyn Manson is probably the most mainstream name on this book.
Yeah, right.
But everyone else in this book, there's people who came before him that highly influenced Marilyn Manson.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of photos of Marilyn Manson with, say, Boyd Rice and all these people that I didn't really think of them ever sharing a room. But here they are. This exploration of baby boomer values is very, very fascinating to me. It's interesting in this book how it seems like a lot of these personalities use imagery such as Nazi imagery or just imagery of true raw hate, not really to express hate toward other people. Because it's interesting that a lot of these artists are have Jewish names or were raised like with at least one Jewish parent. But some of them express, and again, let me give you content warning, plus these are not my views, these are my interpretation of views of others that I see in this book, that there are several artists in this book who talk about how the ultimate rebellion as a Jewish person is to put a swastika on something, or something like that. So it's sort of, it almost is like their version of the white girl kissing a black guy to piss off her dad in some ways. But also, you have a lot of hippie values, virtue signaling about, oh, there's no racism because, we fought that in civil rights, blah, 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 that comes from baby boomers. This idea of the sex revolution and all these hand-holding that I think that they sort of put away when they became parents and became salary people, and their kids saw the hypocrisy in that. So then they take back all these hand-holding values and go, no, fuck you. I'm going to cut your hand off. I'm going to eat your hand, and then I'm going to shove it up your ass, Dad. And it's kind of that in a nutshell.
Yeah, and also, there's I just thought of, exactly. You've got it pretty good there. I would agree with that. And I can only agree with the Gen X version of this, like the younger version. The older people, when I look at some of their stuff, it's pure. It's pure rage, and you can see it get refined as time goes on. And now when you see the alt-right on YouTube, they're a refined version of this. Yes. They're refined. They don't realize that we influence things, but eventually that influence bubbles up from the underground, and they're reading it in some magazine, and they're refining it. But where I'm in history of this, like Sid Vicious used the swastika. He put a shirt on. He put it represented, I assume, power to them. But they, you would see people of color in fetish gear, and it was Nazi looking. And so
I have plenty of picture. If you look real hard for me, wearing latex, very not Nazi looking. It looked actually more like North Korea, I think, based on the colors. But I have been seen wearing military inspired clothing to clubs.
Right, and then like the Hitler salute I saw on the Sieg Heil salute.
Oh, on 8888 in that book in San Francisco?
Well, no, when you do the Sieg Heil like this.
Oh, yes, yes.
That Sieg Heil with your arm. When I see that in the book, I think about, all of us did that as a joke. Like, we were in a fucking bubble, though, man. It was pre-internet. Like, I can't say that enough. Like, but, we're doing that as, like a joke, like we live in America, fascist USA. For Gen X, I can speak for the Gen X part of things. We grew up with the doomsday clock at 2 minutes to midnight. They said we're going to have nuclear war. We don't have a future. Gen X is still invisible to this day. You have millennials and you have boomers, but we're just sitting back watching the war. So we're still invisible. And so it's like, we did that stuff as mocking. At least I did. I know I've taken photos. I don't know if I've taken photos, but I've definitely done that salute as a joke, like the shot beat, but never of course, like I put out extreme artwork. I understand what authoritarianism is. Like that doesn't do me any good as far as the person, the free spirit I am, or the free thinker I am, And I'm also against authority. I'm against authority, period. Had parents that were overly, were abusive. So for me, I did not get attracted to that behavior. I'm repelled from it. Like, that's why I don't like Trump, is because he's an authoritarian. He's not a Republican. He's an authoritarian. So it's like, oh, fuck, that means trouble for all the artists. They get put in the stadiums and shot. So I think most of us understood that back then, too. But we still play with it. Marilyn Manson still plays with that aesthetic to this day on a stage show. He has all the very fascist-looking stage show going,
So I have a quote from Fred Berger regarding the Nazi regalia in the clubs and stuff like that.
And that's Fred Berger from Propaganda Magazine.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Fred Berger from Propaganda Magazine. And this is, again, from why certain things wouldn't be just called military chic. This is actually quite relatable because in the mid-2000s, I did go to a lot of clubs in LA. If you go to Das Bunker, you see exactly what he's talking about here, even today in 2019. Technically, there are no Nazi symbols in Propaganda Magazine. You see that stuff with Hell's Angels, pagans, motorcycle gangs. Those guys are using in-your-face overt Nazi imagery, whereas the industrial, gothic, and military fetish crowd shy away from more overt Nazi imagery in favor of a more sinister, militaristic imagery, which would entail black leather, form-fitting uniforms, riding boots, combat boots, and that kind of thing. But it was not specifically Nazi or even fascistic. It just had that bad guy military look. And that's spot on. The only thing that's really updated from this is that no one's wearing leather out unless they're going to specific leather things. Now they're wearing latex, if not 2-ply vinyl. And the boots are usually polyurethane from Demonia because there are a lot of vegans who come out to clubs. It even like the photo, actually, he has this photo here of these two girls dressed like Hitler Youths, and they're obviously girls, but they have boy haircuts, and they're very intimate in this photo. There's a lot of fetish photography that looks very influenced by this. I mean, look at Blue Blood magazine. There are so many, and Gothic Sluts and all these other things that Blue Blood's empire is part of. It's very, very influenced by Fred Berger. But
not as good. Fred was the top of the line photographer. He was that was art, and Blue Blood's commerce.
Blue Blood is commercial, and definitely shout out to Amelia G and Forrest.
Yeah, I'm friends with them as well. So yeah, know them from the old days too.
Privilege and class is quite interesting in this. The privilege and class is very authentic when it comes from, it seems like, the fry cooks. And you can kind of see who was a fry cook and who's a trust fund baby in this book, at least from an outsider I'm an old millennial, y'all. Whereas it's interesting, the span of most of these artists are pretty much the entire spectrum of Gen X, with exception to the pioneers in the beginning of the book. So the beginning of the... Huh?
When does Gen X start?
Gen X is, I believe, very late 60s. So
really?
Yes.
You're fucking kidding me. All the way to 85, 86, 90?
Wait,
what? Wow.
I'm sorry. So Gen X is, just for everybody's reference here, Gen X were born between 1965 to 1980. So
no, that is so wrong, because I lived as a Gen Xer. I guess, okay, we're born at that time. Okay, I get it. 60
yes.
What? 60 what?
Born in 65 to 1980.
Okay, so half this book is Gen X.
Correct.
Some of these motherfuckers in there are old.
Yes.
I was like, wow.
And the boomers in there, I think that the people who are from the boomer generation are ones who saw the hypocrisy or saccharine insincerity of their peers. Much like someone of my age seeing someone stand for social justice or equality, but they're totally not. And then like using their own platform to show the insincerity of their own peers.
Well, for me, I can say what I saw was, and in the first paragraph in there, I didn't read the whole thing that is my section in that book, but I know it says something about revolution. And I remember harassing people like R. Crumb and John Sinclair. And John Sinclair coined the phrase punk rock. He had one of the first punk rock bands with MC5. And I remember telling them, what did you do? You did nothing. And I remember John Sinclair yelling at me, you wouldn't be wearing those pants right now if it weren't for us. You wouldn't have your hair long if it weren't for us. We were the first people to break. And I'm like, but we were looking for revolution. We were looking for change, dude. You didn't change anything. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. Your war didn't have, and you motherfuckers were blowing up buildings and everything, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. So change when you're young doesn't happen quick enough. But when you get older, you realize you probably won't see the fruit of the seeds that you plant, but you just try to plant them. But, it takes that 8 generations, like I've heard a great deal of natives say to me. And so I think that's the concept. But when I was young, I was like pissed off at them, seeing that hypocrisy, as you might say, like as I think you're saying, like I was hanging around with artists and underground people, and I still saw them as like, oh, now you're all fucking smacked out. Like Bob Rudnick, I used to go get heroin for him and with him, and I was like, what did you do for us, man? Nothing, nothing. But they did do a lot. I can see that now. But
amongst the boomers, there is such a hypocrisy of, we did this for you, Gen X. We did this. You're welcome. When, people who were part of the hippie generation and other sociocultural movements who left home to join a movement that they call a movement really didn't help anything in a large scale, and they didn't express anything except for going off and being a child. Whereas creating something as a form of angry expression, such as a lot of artists here, such as you, such as, this entire book, it does ask questions. It makes people go back and question it. Why did you put that swastika there? Why did you do this? Why are you angry?
I think it's like I said, artwork of prophecy. I know a lot of Gen X people, art-wise, when I check into it, they're like, we told you so, as this authoritarian is in charge now, and things are starting to unfold in a real ugly way in America and all over the globe. We're like, we told you so, like Slayer told you so. Didn't you hear our music? Didn't you hear NWA? We were telling you these cops are fucking jerks. We were telling you this was happening. And now you're like all surprised when you pass around videos online that cops are assholes. But we just were like...
Grandmaster Flash's The Message is a great portrayal of police brutality.
Right, but I look at NWA because they're my generation.
Yes, and especially having America with 3 Ks in it as well.
Right, Ice Cube. Right, so we were like, again, like we're told you so, but we're still not heard. Like Gen X is still not. I don't know. I don't get it. Like we're just nostalgia, but we were prophetic in our artwork. When I see this book and other angry art, it was all Ice Cube. Man, that motherfucker was pissed. Still pissed.
He'll die pissed.
Yeah, but he plays a hokey dad in some films and for Disney. So it's like. I'm amazed that he gets away with that. He's one of the guys who broke out and made it,
Well, as a millennial, I thank you for your service. Do you feel better now? Do you like my virtue signal?
I don't know. I don't feel better. I don't. I like virtue.
I told you thank you. I told you thank you. You need to feel good about yourself now.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand virtue signaling. I get it, but I think it's too new to nail down. So,
the privilege and class differences is quite interesting. The one that stands out the most to me as a incredible gap in class differences between, say, yourself or LaVey is the Partridge Family Temple. When I see that, all I see are trust fund babies who need attention, and they're just farting in public.
I think so. I think you're right. I think even our Adam Parfry was that, and Boyd Rice was that. They all, and Michael Moynihan, all of those people came from an upper middle class thing where we're talking me, or like you're saying LaVey or Mike Diana, we're coming from an upper low class position. And so that definitely the Partridge Family, I've never understood them. I mean, I get it, but I just don't understand how people are. I'm pissed off when people are like, I'm a part of the Partridge Family. I go, you're a clown. I just think in my head, well, you've just put clown makeup on. You're a fucking clown.
Come on, fuck yourself.
Yeah, they've made a clown out of themselves. How can you take anything seriously? These people don't. They're like, we have a colorful nihilism. It's rainbow colored. We put the Partridge Family on it, but we don't care about anything. And it's like, fuck you, man. For my side of this stuff, we care. We cared enough to put our reputations on the line, our futures on the line. I mean, all of it. Like, it's hard to get employed when you, especially with the internet, it's hard to move forward when you're doing art that kills. People are afraid of you. People are fearful. And that reputation carries with me and all of these guys.
The ones who come from money are very insulated, I feel like. They definitely have nothing to lose, because even if they got in trouble, someone will get them out. I see that when you search for Partridge Family Temple, don't increase their value, y'all. I'm just going to tell you what you find. One of the guys got to be on Jon Stewart in the 90s, and you don't get to do that unless you have a parent in the industry or someone connected. And a lot of the exposure these people got for being mediocre was because they had someone pay to play.
I also cut in there. It was also because they were willing to do those shows. A lot of us would not. We turned our back on society for a reason.
Right. And they can fall back on anything afterwards. So they have nothing to lose.
Right. But we were making our own media. We don't need your TV. We don't need your magazines. We'll make our own zines and we'll do our own thing and we'll communicate to our own tribe. Fuck you. And you're not going to exploit us. We get exploited when we go to work for no money. But we're not going to be exploited anymore. We run our show. We sail this ship, and you're not allowed on. And I remember, when I did the Expo, the Extreme, it was hilarious because, all this media wanted to come in. Jerry Springer, Spin Magazine. Spin Magazine was a big magazine back then. National Enquirer. All these people wanted to come to the Expo, the Extreme. And I was and they're looking for press passes. And I'm like, oh, no, you have to pay for the ticket. And they're like, okay, how much is the ticket? And I go, for media, it's $300. And they're like, tickets are $30. I go, yeah, but you're media. You have to pay $300 to access this. And some of them did. Jerry Springer wrote a check for $1,000. I'm like, come on in with the cameras. But that's what you do. That's what we did. Same with when I did 666 Eve in L.A. The Omen, the remake of The Omen, wanted to get in that show and promote. And I'm like, no fucking way. You got to write a check. And they wrote a check for $5,000 and put us on the extras of the DVD for The Omen. But it's that's what we were about. We weren't about I'm going to get on Jon Stewart to increase my value, as you say, or to move up on my ladder, climb the ladder of my career. It's fuck you, Jon Stewart. Fuck all of you.
And the only way you can show the man or stick it to everybody, make them pay. Make them pay what they owe you. And so what you were doing was exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to extort the mainstream because you are the Robin Hoods of medium.
Well, when you make them pay, you are of value. And when you're of value, you get on the DVD, like the 666 Eve DVD extras. Right. When you make them pay, you get on the TV show, no doubt. They're like, well, if we wouldn't have paid, we would have gave you a minute, but now we're giving you a whole fucking show because that was cool. They've invested in you, and now they're interested. They're not just they didn't get the milk for free. We made them pay.
And if you, as the so-called artist, are the ones paying, you're a fucking tourist, and that's why you're paying.
Yeah, or you give it away for free. You're like desperate. That's how I look at it.
Then you're a hoe.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and what? Doesn't a hoe get paid?
You are right. You're a slut.
Yeah. You're a slut, and it's
someone's going to take that out of context now, but that's fine. I say slut very beautifully. You're a slut.
Yeah, but giving it away is like, whatever. It cheapened our whole thing. We obviously had something here. It's still reverberating, and so, and I'm not necessarily happy how it's interpreted.
So amongst your circles during the time, were there ever, of course there's disagreements because these are all very different people from each other, but were there ever times that amongst yourselves, you artists, that you felt that something was problematic or that people felt hurt or offended by others' artwork?
Well, this is the difference when you're an underground artist or when you're an artist, I think. I mean, present day, it's a little different. But when you're an artist, you can talk about anything. You can have a conversation with a room full of artists. You can all be painting, sculpting, and talk about any fucking thing. All the taboos are right there because we're speaking occult. And what is the occult? It's taboo. It's things that aren't put into the libraries. It's unpopular thought. So that's what artists do. We talk about these unpopular things a lot of times. And we're not talking about baking cookies and shit like that. We're talking about heavy subjects. And so, yes, there was subjects like when Peter Sotos' name came up, people would go, ew. Like some people were like, gross, that guy's gross. But it wasn't like he was shunned. It was just like, man, Peter's weird. Like, I don't get it. He was
into weird shit.
We don't know if he was but he was angry enough. And he got arrested for like child porn. And to this day, I don't know if Peter Sotos is serious or not about his sexual desires, but he definitely is able to communicate a predator in a fucking way that's scary. Like, it's like how art like you feel him. You're like, holy fuck, dude, you're creeping me out. And that's about the extent of it. And yes, we did get into fights. We have disagreements. It's yes. And there was certainly people that were very anti-fascist, and they understood what it was, and they would act out against it, and there were certainly those components, but for the most part, it wasn't until this stuff bubbled up to the mainstream did it become controversial. It's not, you don't have controversy even among Satanists and stuff. Like old school Satanists, let's say, before there was all these, everyone's a Satanist no matter what you believe, and anyone can be a Satanist. Yeah, anyone can be a Satanist. You don't have to be a Satanist to be a Satanist. Isn't that what the TST says, the Satanic Temple? You don't have to be a Satanist to be a Satanist. So before those days, like, you could communicate anything with people, and they would be like, yeah, well, based on what you just said, I probably hate you. But they weren't shocked by it. It's only when it bubbled up to the mainstream, with like Marilyn Manson. When he bubbled up to the mainstream, he caught all the blame for society's ills. He caught all the blame. Motherfucker was the scapegoat of the 90s. I don't know. Yeah, like he was the scapegoat of the 2000s, probably. He was, man, I don't know how that guy's not, like devastated at this point, all the shit he caught.
I wish I could go back in time with this book and go back to adolescent me when my parents gave me hell for Marilyn Manson and my peers, etc., and just open up this book and be like, there, see? There's far worse monsters under the bed. Because, I mean, it's hard to shock me, and some of the content in this was like, are you serious? Or like, you can do that? And that brings up another content about what you can do, is that, yes, you can. Yes, you probably have to withhold a lot of responsibility and make explanations to perhaps the FBI, to the cops, etc. Oh. But think about also what was happening in the 80s, that fucking wall, the Cold War, all these expressions that you couldn't have certain expressions, and you've been told your whole life about the starving kids in China and all these other things. But as Americans, you do have that liberty to express yourself, even if it's disgusting, even if it's offensive. And this was a, hey, check it out. Look what I'm doing, because this is America.
Right. And you bring up a law, and I didn't think to bring this up before, but like I had the Secret Service visit me because of an article I ran from G.G. Allen where he talks about killing the president. I've had like mayors of townships pull my zines, and send a letter out to stores saying, if you carry this zine, we will shut you down. So yeah, we were in constant. This stuff, when it shocks you, imagine it 25 years ago. Imagine it 20 years ago when it was like, it was really shocking then. It was like they couldn't believe this stuff was falling. And the big reason we were able to do a lot of this was the advent of Kinko's and the copy machine. Technology helped us. Like computers were like big fucking things in the day, 70s or whatever, when I was a child. And then they started getting smaller and smaller. And when I wanted to do a zine, my friend Carmi was like, hey, dude, I got a copy machine at work. And I've got the keys and I've got a computer there. I go, well, how will I lay it out? I have to paste it up and everything. She goes, no, I got a computer program that'll do that. And I'm like, great. And she's like, we can go in at night. I got the keys, and we went in, made copies. She'd do the computer shit. And, that's how we were doing this stuff. Like, but it was technology that drove it, same as today. Technology drove our freedom of speech, a freedom of expression. And looking at that book, I'm very proud to be a part of it. I'm very proud to be a part of this because it's artwork that has consequence. It's an art movement, and it'll go down in history. That's a historic art movement. Someday that stuff will be in museums, like you see stuff today from the 60s or 50s or all that stuff. This is an art movement that was prophetic and is also still reverberating in the politics of today. It's influenced a lot, and I'm surprised by that. I'm really surprised. You never know when you're younger what's going to last. Like when your uncle's listening to ZZ Top or some shit, and you're like, I wonder what'll last in my thing. And to know Marilyn Manson's still out there is really cool. Or
it's amazing he still doesn't play on the radio, but Nine Inch Nails will.
Right, or black metal's like classic rock at this point. Mayhem's been around for fucking 30 years. So they're technically classic rock. You'll never hear them on the radio, though. Satanic metal is classic rock, and it survived. I would have never thought that back in the day. I would have never thought that. And I have an excellent imagination, and I would have never imagined that.
It is beyond amazing to see this in a book. I have to say that. It's very different than seeing something on the internet, which can be reproduced over and over and over, whereas the book is sort of like a solid piece of, it's an artifact. It's an artifact, but also I think of the cost of print. I think of all these things like someone deemed all of this art worth printing, which costs money, versus just resharing something that costs nothing on the internet. And
and then think about it. Like Adam Parfrey had, he a couple of his books have been optioned for movies. I think a couple of his authors have back in the day they would receive in like $250,000 checks. So it was like, not only did people put money into these books, but some people at studios in Hollywood were like, we'd like to option that story. We want that. That's dramatic. That's heavy. Like Lords of Chaos, which is finally made into a movie. Lords of Chaos is a great movie, and it's for me like represented a big part of my life. Like when I saw that movie, I was like, yeah, that party there where they're all drunk and everyone's fucking and they're doing drugs and they're shooting off shotguns. I've been to that party.
That's how I felt about Party Monster.
Right.
I wasn't old enough for Limelight, but a lot of that culture leaked into LA's club scene because a lot of the
like that. But when you're younger, you are like that. You do make, you make these weird judgments and stuff like that. So we went there to see Freak Show. We didn't go there to have fun. And I wish like today, that's like almost a regret. Like I didn't have fun that, I
you
just
would have had a blast.
Oh, I know. I could see them having fun, but I wasn't comfortable enough. You know what I mean? I have this toxic masculinity. You're growing up and you're in Chicago, so you have to be tough. So all of that stuff is just playing out right there. But I could tell you my secret thoughts. Man, those motherfuckers look sexy, and I want to be over there dancing and doing drugs with them, and that looks like fucking so much fun. But you're with your friends, and you gotta play tough. It's just one of those things.
I saw a picture in the book of Leibach performing at Limelight. And if anyone ever thought Leibach were a bunch of Nazis, because, first of all, Leibach is one of the biggest influencers to industrial dance music, like what would be played where Rivet Heads dance. Their musical style and their aesthetic of wearing military uniforms pretty much sealed the deal for industrial dance music. And they became quite controversial when they performed in North Korea a few years ago. They've been sort of seen by industrial music fans who are perhaps keen to find problematic artists as a problematic artist. And dude, they played at Limelight, where you can be any race or sexual orientation and come from anything and you're accepted. They wouldn't have allowed him to play there if he was a Nazi. Again,
true.
Limelight is Michael Alec and James St. James's thing.
Yeah, but back in that day, it was literally like this bubble where people weren't able to communicate their hurt feelings to, you know what I mean? It was just this, it was that way. And I mean, even like Death in June, they were able to play around and black, like now you have boycotts on black metal bands and Death in June and all that stuff. And I'm not saying those boycotts are wrong or right. I'm happy. That's free speech to me. Let's go. Let's hash it out. But it was not like that for sure back then, for sure. We're pretty accepting. That might have been a reverberation from the 60s, from the hippies. It was sort of like that reverberation stuck just like our reverberation is sticking to this day, where we were real accepting. Like that's what the underground had for me, was like, wow, I'm accepted. Like the bullies and jocks and all that stuff from high school weren't accepting, and they were abusive and toxic, where the underground was pretty cool.
For some reason, this makes me think of the Calvin Klein CK1 commercial of the early 90s, where all those people are in their blue jeans and underwear or whatever, and they're standing against a wall and it's black and white, and they say things like, I don't want to be seen for my color or my religion. I just want to be, CKB, because they want to just be. And I feel like even that commercial is heavily influesned by your art movement, because the idea of being known for your art, for your expression, not as, the snot-nosed kid who shit their pants in 4th grade or anything like that. You want to move past whatever traumas you had in your life and just be. And I see a lot of that message in a lot of artists' work as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good observation. It's a great observation.
So there's a couple names here and there that you've definitely worked with that I'd like to kind of go through. We've spoke earlier, and so I've already highlighted all of the names that I'm going to mention. I'm going to quickly hold up my book to show all the bookmarks I have set, because I did my homework.
You do your work, that's for sure.
And this has become, this is like a textbook. It's fantastic. It's a piece of not just art history, but there's a little bit of musicology in there, because there are a lot of artists who dabbled in industrial music, which this is a side of industrial music I don't know anything about, because I only knew industrial music through going to clubs and eventually playing those club musics as a DJ. And so industrial music fans, I'm a fucking tool bag. So forgive me. I don't listen to Throbbing Gristle. I don't really care for Skinny Puppy so much.
I got the same problem with boomers. I was hanging out with a boomer the other night, and she's like, you ever hear ELO? You probably never heard of ELO. And I go,
oh
yeah,
my
I
God,
have.
my father-in-law once asked me that.
Okay, I go, I've heard of ELO. They did the Xanadu soundtrack. And she goes, what is Xanadu? And I go, Olivia Newton John. It's a great soundtrack. Like, as a kid, I love Xanadu. And I put it on my phone, and she's like, oh my God, that's the worst ELO thing I've ever heard. But her worst is my best. It was the only thing I knew of ELO, was the end of ELO's career. Anyway.
That makes me think of all... Xanadu. It makes me think... That makes me think of how so many baby boomers are into Dark Side of the Moon, which, in my opinion, is the worst Pink Floyd sound... one of the worst Pink Floyd albums, whereas the earlier Syd Barrett ones are far better.
Oh, yeah.
And, boomers, if your favorite song by Pink Floyd is Money, we can't hang out. However, if you're into Echoes, cash me outside. We'll go get lunch.
Yeah. Love it.
So, some of these names I've got highlighted here. We just talked about him. Let's go ahead and talk about him because he gets brought up oftentimes as your homeboy, even though I know you're not homeboys. Adam Parfrey. He often gets brought up now as sort of this problematic person who promotes Nazis and that he's just blah, blah, blah. And he was friends with Shane, and he look at all these pictures of all these problematic pictures together. But all I see when I see the picture of Adam Parfrey on Wikipedia is David S. Pumpkins.
From Saturday Night Live,
yes.
Right? Adam was, we had a relationship. Good and bad. Adam did not like me at some point because I made him pay for a book that he hijacked, or it was sold twice. Sandra London, who was also in the book, sold this book to me as a publisher. You know, as a publisher, you give some, like, here, I'll give you $500 and I get the rights to publish these books, and I'll pay you more upon publication. You make a deal. Well, she went to Adam and did the same thing. And then I found out when I went to meet Adam at a book signing, he was at Quimby's Queer Store, a zine store in Chicago. And he told me he was publishing it. Someone there, no, Peter Sotos started the trouble. He said, Shane, he's publishing your book. And I go, what? And I asked him about it. And he says, yeah. And I go, no, you're not. And so I went home, and long story short, I had a lawyer talk to me, and they said, well, you just tell Adam this. Like, he can publish that book all he wants, but 3 days after publication, he'll be destroying all the books because you have a contract. And he'll have to chop up those books on video and all this stuff. And that's what happens when you do that. And so I called Adam and told him that. And he's like, what do you want from me, Shane? I go, I want $500. And, so there's a quote somewhere from Parfrey that's like, I paid $500 to get Shane off my back or whatever. And back in the day, you couldn't Xerox photo checks. It was illegal to copy a check on a photo machine. But we had Kinko's, so I got a color copy of it. I had it framed for a long time. It was a very proud trophy. But everyone hated me after that. It was like, like in this whole book, I think I only still talk to like Stanton LaVey, or Marilyn Manson. Like, everyone else is full of hatred. And it's because, like, I made my own moves. I didn't ask any permission. I didn't ask for help. I just did it. And Parfrey, like, when I did that, I know a lot of people like, why'd you extort money out of Parfrey? And I go, extort? Like, and this is like these rich kids talking to me like I don't have a right to fight for my shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lawyer told me I was perfectly in the right to ask for that money. But because I'm, a scumbag from the wrong zip code, I had no right to get money from Parfrey for some reason. I don't understand it. But I got the money, and fuck him. And I published better. Parfrey had a business of publishing, so he had to publish lame stuff here and there. I didn't. These were all fucking grenades to me. These were bombs. So I published the hardest of the hardcore. And when people understand this culture, they'll be like, "Oh, Shane," they'll tell me, like, you published hardcore stuff, like Might is Right, Jim Goad's The Rape Issue, Answer Me Number 4, The Rape Issue, and these are all phenomenal books on their own. Like, they're just really bombs. They're really explosive. So I wouldn't publish it if it wasn't gonna make you cry or react. When I published Extermination Zone by Randall Phillips, I remember coming out to the zine, the first anarchist book convention in San Francisco. Yes, I'm that old. And I remember Seth Friedman from Fact Sheet 5 walked up and said, Shane, my nihilist friends are disturbed by your book, Extermination Zone. Would you give them a refund? And I go, no fucking way, dude. And he's like, I'm asking from me to you if you would do that for me. And I go, yeah, I'll do it because you're asking for a favor. But, fuck them. They bought the book. They got a choke on it. And he was just like, he's like, Shane, that's a big compliment, though, to your company that nihilists are freaked out. And at the time, I didn't really even understand what a nihilist was. I was like, nah.
It sounds like you were the adversary to Adam Parfrey.
Yeah.
A true adversary, an inversion of him. And he was threatened by you.
Oh, yeah. And that's what most of these people, I think, like the Partridge Family, when I ran into them and at the Angry Mail Tour, and Ghetto Partridge came up to me all tough. Like, you could tell, she's like, motherfucker, don't come up to me and talk that shit. Like I'm from Chicago. Like, I got to keep saying this, but it's a warning. I'm from Chicago. We got to smack you in the fucking neck right away. Like, we got to punch you in your Adam's apple when you come up on us like that, because you might kill us. You might shoot me. Like, it's, we can't fuck around here. So she comes up on me and gets in my face about Owen Boyd Rice money from the Expo, the Extreme. And I go, oh, you fucking, I might have called it a C word. Who knows? I definitely called it a C word. That would have flown out of my mouth. So you fucking cunt, you get the fuck out of my face. You don't know Boyd Rice didn't play the show. He doesn't deserve any money. And if you keep getting in my face, I'm going to flip you around. I said something like that to her. Her eyes got real big and she saw I was serious. And she's like with a couple other people, guys and her, and they back off. They walk right away because I was actually serious. They met a real, a person who'd lived on the streets of Chicago, not a person whose parents did not help me, like you were saying, their parents would help them out. I didn't have that.
Why did she come at you?
Because she was Boyd Rice's friend and she had heard that, because I look like I'm from that zip code you can pick on. She's like a sports person. She came at me just like the jocks did in high school. So it was like one of those things. She came at me to pick on me. And then when I was like, put my fists up, like, I'm going to start fighting all of you in 1 second. Like, all of you. I don't care if you're a girl or a guy. I'm going to fight all of you because you're scaring me. That I have a fear when you, like, I'm from this city here. You get a fear and you strike as quick as you can, or you get hit. So, or you run. And I wasn't going to run. I'm, fuck that shit. And I'm not going to get bullied by jocks anymore. Like, fuck you. I'm an original school shooter. Like, we dreamed of that shit. And I don't like those violent things anymore. And I'm not into that. But it's like I said in the Columbine show. If I don't have peace, you don't have peace. And that's how it is. Like, like damaged people. And so you want a beautiful world, start planting flowers in the bad neighborhoods, start, doing something that's constructive on top of your criticisms, Anyway, sorry if I'm rambling on.
Not at all. Your story reminds me of so many hipster clubs that I went to, and I just wore whatever the fuck I wanted because I was told that if you dress cool enough, you get to be on their top 10. I made the top 10 twice. Twice, kids, in a row. And I remember seeing a lot of girls who looked sort of like their descendant was Gittle Partridge. And, they looked cool. They were hot shit. But I would notice that they sort of started to tone it down and get suddenly uncomfortable when myself and my friends would show up. Myself and my friends who dress this way when we go everywhere. And I would get dirty looks from these girls. Or sometimes there would be weird confrontations where they'd basically take little swipes at me because they didn't like me in their space. They didn't like that I was making them self-conscious when if I wasn't there and it was just amongst their friends, they could act however they wanted. I've seen this similar action with otaku, like, people who dress like anime or pretend they're Japanese or whatever. They're safe in their bubble, and it's very similar. They can behave however they want, but when a real one's around, they feel funny about it.
Yeah, and that passive aggressive bullshit doesn't play in Chicago. Like, that doesn't work for us. So it was like it sounds passive aggressive there too. Like the real deal walked into the club, and they get passive aggressive or whatever, Anyway, fuck all them.
Fuck all them. Let's see. Let's talk Jim Goad and answer me.
Oh God.
Who is Jim Goad?
Jim Goad he's a big alt-right guy now, I guess. But he did Answer Me 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it became a huge hit in the underground. And I remember, anywhere you go, have you heard of Answer Me? Because I forget what they all were, but one was about suicide, one was about yada, 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 and the last one, the fourth one, was about rape. And he was an actual writer from college that basically, to sum him up, he was a careerist. So he saw the underground, as many people in art school do, as something to take from to use for their careers. And that's what he did. And he did it well. Like I can't say that his zines weren't really fucking cool, really well written, really well researched. Like the rape issue was phenomenal because it had stories from people who were victimized. It had everything. It really gave you a complete idea of what that is. And so it was really heavy. And so I hate the guy, but I appreciated what him and Debbie did. I really did. And so I remember flying him out for the Expo, the Extreme. And, I remember, this is great. I forgot about this story. But we went to, back and forth. And he's like, if I ever come to Chicago, I'm going to kick your ass. And I'm like, all right, motherfucker. And when people would threaten me, I'd be like, here's my number. Here's my address. Knock on my door anytime. You come by my house and we'll go. And so all of a sudden one night, I'm like in my underwear, laying on the bed, about to go to sleep. But the phone rings. I pick it up and it's Jim Goad. He goes, Shane, I'm in Chicago. I go, where are you? And he gives me the address. I put down the phone. I get dressed and I go there. I'm like, fucking, let's do this. And he's at a restaurant. He's around a table of people. And I'm going right up and I'm like, looking, how do I get over this table? How do I get at him before he gets to me? And he stands up and puts his hand out to shake my hand. And he goes, good to meet you, Shane. And I'm like, well, good to meet you, Jim. And then we went to a gallery and in Underground Poop Studios. We went there and hung out and talked all night. And, it was one of those things. On the Angry Mail tour, he wouldn't hang out with us. Like we were at the mentor's house and they fed us fish and all this stuff. And he did all the, I heard later that he called the police on me because I had the Geen Stone and he was on parole on the Angry Mail tour. So the cops came and got it, and it was because of Goad. Like Mr. Anti-cop, anti-narc called the cops on me. People don't know that, but that's the deal. And we have a lot of me and Goad just don't like each other. He's on the Angry Mail tour ended where this is great.
Okay.
So so he didn't have any association with us. He didn't plan the show. He just was going to do it. And so we're in Vegas, and there's a show being canceled in New Mexico. And I'm talking amongst the people who built the show and worked on it for months before we went on the tour. I'm like, what do we do? And my idea is let's go down there and do the show anyway, right on the mayor's doorstep. Let's do the Angry Mail tour right in the square of the city. Let's just go down there and do it at the park. Let's do it right at the city hall. And Goad's in there and he's like, no, let's skip it and go right to Texas. I don't want problems. And I'm like, dude, you didn't have anything to do with the planning. You haven't said a word. And now you're going to pipe up? Fucking no, pipe down. It's up to us. You didn't put any time into this. You're just on the ride. You didn't build the roller coaster. And so don't tell us how to run the roller coaster. And he stands up and we get into it. And he's like, this is the funniest line. I laughed in his face. He's like, if I weren't on parole, I'd knock your block off.
Who says that?
That's what I said to him. I go, knock your block. I said exactly those words. Who says that? And I start laughing just like you laughed. And he runs out of the room. And I'm looking around. He runs out of the room. And I'm like, oh, shit. And everyone's like, what do you think? He's going to continue the tour? And I go, I'll go down and talk to him. And so they're like, you want to go by yourself? What if you guys fight? And I'm like, then we fight. And I knock on his hotel room a couple times and he doesn't answer. And so he went home. He flew home. It was, so, and then he called me a dung beetle on his website and then deleted it real quick.
Because dung beetles wrote him and told him that it was problematic to all the dung beetles.
Yeah, right. Whatever it was. I just know that he left, and it's so disappointing because he talked the shit, but then when I show up, he shakes my hand. And he did this too on the tour. So he talks shit about some guy, and then the guy shows up and he puts his hand up. Hello, Pete, or whatever the guy's name was. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like, that's not the underground I'm from. We're like, if we have a problem with someone, we're gonna, have the problem. If Jim wouldn't have held his hand out and went to shake my hand, we would have had a problem.
Why was he on parole, or what did he get arrested for?
Oh, and this is like, yeah, well, Jim got involved in drugs, and then he was in Oregon, and I guess if you pick someone up and carry him for 3 feet, it's kidnapping. So he got busted for shit like that. He was abusing his girlfriend. They had a mutually abusive relationship. And I understand, I got people out there that are listening. I'm not into this toxic masculinity. I understand it's a big mistake. So I'm not boasting about this. I'm just being honest about what happened. But I see my actions as when I retell these stories, I'm like, oh, gross, horrible. I acted that way. Horrible. I'm talking like this. I'm not into that. So please, this is the way it is back then. I'm not like that anymore. So he was arrested for something like that, and he went to prison for, I think, kidnapping and abuse. Like in Oregon, they took it very seriously, so he did years. And so that's when I got Answer Me Number 4. I bought that from him, the rights to publish that, because I was one of the only people still talking to him. Like that, he was there. You asked about if people were upset about something in the community.
Yes,
that was something people were upset about. Like when we toured. And I've been to Austin a bunch of times. Austin's was one of my favorite towns to go to and do book shows and stuff. And a couple people down there said they were disappointed with me. They're like, we love all the extreme shit you put out, but this guy's an actual asshole. He actually did beat his girlfriend up. Like, fuck that dude. He's not coming in my store. And I was like, yeah, but and they're like, there's no buts about it. He actually did it. Like, to write about it and to do it are two different things. And I was like, wow. And they're right. To a degree, they're right. I don't know how to communicate that stuff right now. I'm going through my own mess.
There's a lot of expression that would be categorized in 2019 as toxic masculinity within this book.
Oh,
and it's interesting to think of who stuck to their guns and is still expressing themselves this way and who doesn't anymore. And it's quite interesting. It seems like about 2/3 of the artists are still kind of doing the same thing, and the other third seem to have gone a different way since then.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like when I look at, I think when I looked at the book, I thought something similar. Like, it's weird that they're stuck in this. It's like ego, or this toxic masculinity, or this ego, this corrupt ego, not the real ego, but a fake ego that they stuck to. And I'm like, what a boring life that is, to not evolve, to not let yourself feel it, to not be vulnerable. Like for me as an artist, that's it. Like feeling life, feeling mistakes, feeling success, feeling all of the things of life has to offer you. And to be so stubborn and rigid in your ways where you're like, I'm this and that's it, and people know me for this. I get that. It becomes your identity. It was hard for me to break away because it became my identity. And, but I was able, I think that's where it shows like the real artist in the situation, like Genesis George. Like he grew into I forget what he calls himself, but transsexual. He doesn't call him transsexual. He has a different name for it. I know he has breasts. But he's androgynous or something like that. I forget.
Goes by they as well.
They, yeah. Mm-hmm. So he changed in a really dramatic way, which I appreciate. I was like, wow, that guy's fearless, like courageous. And that's what I want to be as an artist. I aspire to be courageous. I aspire to put stuff out that is going to bother me and you. Like, it's like I see so many artists from that era stuck in this loop. Like if they did portraits, they still doing the same satanic stuff. They're still doing the same stuff. And it's like, where is it? Where's your truth? That couldn't be your truth. You've got 20 years in between there and here. There has to be a different truth at this point. You have to think differently about yourself. But I think they're afraid to put it out there because maybe it's the exact opposite of what they were doing then. And a lot of people tell me my work now is very opposite of what I did then. I don't see it that way. I do. I see it as evolved, but I don't see it as changed. It's just me. And it's how I think. I didn't purposely go, I'm going to do wilted flowers. I didn't purposely do that shit. Like, it just happened. And you know, I still have my foot in my childhood where I like doing things about burning churches and, you know, that's a fun, it's fun for me, some of that stuff, you know. So I have pleasure in it. It's not like I'm doing it because it's not, you know, it's fun and it's artwork, but it's not like it, you know, I think it scares museums to the point where I know some of my work will be in there after I'm dead, but I don't know where I'm going to go right now with it because it's scary. But I like scaring people. I like challenging people. I shouldn't say I like scaring them. I like challenging people.
I think the fine line between challenging and doing something just for attention to challenge others.
I think quite a few did. I think when I looked through the book, I couldn't see too many Partridge families. Even though I see people of different classes, like let's say you can be a rich person and still get raped by your father and have a lot of issues. So I think there were a lot of people with sincere issues. For myself, a lot of times when I think back on my stuff was a punch to my father's face. It was like, I want you to pay attention to this anger. I want to show people my anger. They didn't help me. They didn't step in when I was being picked on by my father or other people. And I also felt like expression is the most important thing. If my father had this kind of expression, he wouldn't have been that way. Like I started figuring that out at a young age. I was angry and wanted to hurt people too, but I started drawing pictures of hurt. I started doing things like that. And as a child, I was drawing pictures and showing them to people, just like when we spoke of the Problem Child review. I was doing that instead of actually fucking hurting people you know, and I have such a rage that the few times I've been in fights, like I bit a guy's nipple off once, you know, I was hanging there. Like when I got in fights, it was for death. Like I wanted to kill people. I was gouging eyes. I was like going for it, like biting holes in people. So I had a rage that could have hurt people, but I did other things because I don't know why. I couldn't even tell you why I did that versus hurting people. But I think it's just my character. And I always thought, man, if my dad had these crayons or if he did this, he wouldn't be hurting me. So that's my trip. You know, I don't know what you asked even now that I'm thinking about this stuff.
Let's quickly go through as we wrap up this episode. I would like to quickly give a little bit of acknowledgement to the precursors, and they are called the precursors in this book, which is why I'm using this word. These are the ones who came before this movement of underground art, and we'll just kind of go through them, see how you feel about them. The first one being probably the one that most of everyone mentions here. William S. Burroughs.
Oh, I don't really care about him one way or another. He's so, you know, but his influence has already seeped into my culture where I read it and I don't understand it's his influence anymore. So that's, okay. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people will tell me he's a great writer and stuff like that. And I never thought much of him. I think he's a rich guy who ripped off Neil Cassidy. As I looked at their history, Jack Kerouac and him ripped off the poor guy. They went there and they said that. They're like, wow, this guy has a beat in his voice. He's singing. His words are like poetry. His words are like a music, like jazz. And they ripped him off and made this whole beat culture based on this guy from the ghetto, poor white guy, a drunkard. And they all ran with it. And he died frozen on the train tracks at 40-something years old. So that's what I see William Burroughs as, someone who exploited a situation. He's very much like Jim Goad. He was a professional writer who saw something to exploit to make himself famous. And he was like Jim Goad, a really, really good writer that could exploit anything, a technical manual. He could write about anything. He's just, you know, good. And Burroughs was that, but I don't think he was genuine. You know, I don't.
Why do you think a lot of people from your generation quote or name drop William S. Burroughs as an inspiration?
They're probably from college, and that's how they get an identity real quick. I mean, the only one I respect, the only reason I want to check out William Burroughs is because Patti Smith loves him so much, and I really love her. I think she's the best writer I've ever read. And so I think a lot of people say his name so they can immediately have an identity.
Okay, sort of like being a film student and being into Tarantino and Kubrick.
Right. It's like it's an easy identity, quick.
Okay. The next one. Stanton LaVey. Hey.
Yeah. I think when you said most everyone talked about him, when I looked through the book, I'm like, wow, everyone in here is a Satanist. Like every motherfucker is talking like LaVey.
Yes, that too.
Whether they know it or not, they were like him. So, I mean, what more can I say about Stanton LaVey? But his influence is very much like Crowley's, where Crowley's is still reverberating to this day, and people don't realize it. And LaVey's is still reverberating to this day, but people don't realize it. And a lot of people put him as a fascist or, the right wing. They look at the Church of Satan at that because they have more of a nihilistic streak to them. But I think LaVey was a true free thinker, especially when you read his interviews and stuff like that. He was definitely poking a stick at people to get them to be upset or to think or to debate.
It's interesting, too, that a lot of people within the last 5 years with a degree have capitalized on LaVey. Yeah,
amazing.
It's quite interesting that Zenna is in this book as well. And this is before her split. This is still Satanist Zenna before she became just Zenna Shrek and then later on Zenna. And so this is San Francisco Zenna hanging out with Adam Parfrey, Nicholas Schreck, Boyd Rice, and they're kind of like the Brat Pack of edgelords.
Well, right, if you look at it though, Stanton ends the book. Zenna's in the middle, and LaVey's up.
And that too, her son.
So George understands this culture very well. George Petros, the author, and so Zenna, like Nicholas Schreck, like there's hangers on, there's groupies, there's shit like that. They hang on and they make a career out of who they're fucking. And that's Nicholas Schreck. And I don't mean to put the guy down or put him up. I don't care about the guy either way. But Zenna was the real deal. She's like, even like I looked on her Facebook page yesterday and I was like, man, she is still doing it. She's still beautiful. And she's still like, and I mean, as an artist, just still a just beautiful artist expressing herself, communicating in such an intelligent way. I'm a big fan of Zenna's, and I always have been. And I think she was the one who lifted the Church of Satan up to a degree that it could be respectable again. And that's where Parfrey and everyone got attracted to was Zenna. They were like, wow, look at LaVey's daughter on TV. Wow. And everyone ran to her. And she was able to communicate it in a way that her father wasn't.
So they were hanger-ons.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, all of them. Right. They all made. See, it's another, like when you put the Me Too movement involved in this, Zenna's the one who lived this whole book. Zenna's the one who lifted up LaVey again because he was, forgotten. She went on TV and spoke for him, and she spoke well and as good or not better than him or different. Let's say equal but different. And so there you go. But I know like Stanton doesn't like her, and Stanton's got issue with her, and she has issue with Anton. So it's very dysfunctional, or functional hate, I should say. It's very functional hate.
Much like all of us, what we see of LaVey's family is only what we got to see. And they saw each other every day. Yeah. And I think that I have chosen not to really overanalyze or dig the conflicts between that family because it's theirs to deal with. It's theirs to recognize what they want. But you should all know that we don't we're not trying to cause a rift about team whoever. I personally like all three of them. I've never met Stanton before, but I like all three. I love those three generations very much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as a person that's behind the curtain, not an observer, there's a lot of people observe this stuff and want to get into the gossip of it, but I have sympathy, and I don't want to say that in a negative way. Like, I have respect for all of them.
Yes.
Because it's a motherfucker living as a public Satanist. A lot of people see Marilyn Manson or rock stars and they want to put on a Baphomet shirt because they're afraid, and it scares people away, and it gives them the identity, like the William S. Burroughs crowd, an immediate identity. And so, but LaVey probably had a hard time in life because he was a public Satanist. Zenna, same. Stanton, same. Hard life. When you're out there and saying, yeah, I'm a Satanist in a Christian world, in a Christian culture with money that says in God we trust, man, we're lucky we're not getting shot and killed. And that might be coming up with the Trump stuff. That's what, authoritarians aren't going to be for, they use Christians as their tool. They can't use us. The Satanists aren't a tool. So it's like, we're the ones that they got to worry about. And that's because of our mind, not because of our violence, but we're willing, to fight for our lives. So I think like being a public Satanist is a really hard deal. A lot of people critique Stanton, and, I always stuck up for him. I remember when that was one of the reasons I was like happy to go to war with the Church of Satan and Peter, because they really were down on him. And I was like, man, this is the time we should be helping, lifting this kid up or giving him some opportunities. Like, why aren't we working with him? Why are you, I feel like, and I'm telling Peter, I go, I feel like you're shunning this guy because he's a threat to your throne. Not
and
because
they're behaving like a post-Tsar Russia. They're
right.
kind of overthrowing this, basically what was a figurehead family.
Yeah, right. And I didn't like that at all. I mean, I didn't know Stanton that much at the time, but I think he's a really smart smart man. I want to say young man because I'm thinking 30 years ago, but he's a smart man. He's a very smart man.
He's around my age, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I flipped over to the last pages, which are Stanton LaVey and his then wife, Zandora. And a quote from Zandora I'm going to read here is something, it's a big old dog whistle to all you internet Satanists who have decided to jump on and haven't done your homework yet. She was asked, what is the new generation of Satanism? And so she said, well, I see there are two kinds of Satanists these days. The Bible-thumping Anton LaVey clone types who view Satanism as a dogma or formal religion that has strict rules based almost entirely on the personal preferences of one person or another. Then there's the other kind, my kind, the modern Satanist. I call it modern with a capital M because it really is a separate movement altogether. Anton LaVey talked about modern Satanism and how his religion was the evolving one. There are many role players, gamers, and dorky coven groups having witchy meetings, and they're typically depressed, and they read the Satanic Bible way too much, and so much that it becomes the rule book. And she then, goes on and talk about how she's a stay-at-home mother and lover and a hula hooping devil girl by night. By the way, she is a brilliant dancer. And it's quite interesting that she said this quite a while back, and it sort of holds true. But what do you think?
Well, I have mixed feelings about Zandora. I'm friends with her. I was able to take a lot of I take a bunch of photos of her and in Vegas and stuff like that. And right now she's associated with the Satanic Temple.
I was about to point out that it's quite interesting that she moved on from Stanton and has been tied in sort of like with Satanic Philadelphia and TST.
Yeah, she's involved with them. And I don't really appreciate that because it's basically hypocritical to what she just said.
Yes. As I was reading it, I sort of that sort of sunk into myself as well.
Yeah. So she's sort of hypocritical with that stuff. So I used to think like when all this stuff was happening and Boyd Rice was saying I should have been the king of Church of Satan and all these people were complaining about it after LaVey's death a couple of years after, I said Zandora should be the head of it because I see a woman, like they should be brought up in the ranks more than they are. This is male dominated stuff. COS was back then, Temple of Satan is. And I see females as, we should be having females, people of color, stuff like that involved. And so I said that back then, but I only see her as a tool at this point, like a Christian. She's a tool of whoever will pay her. And so...
like a Tammy Faye.
Yeah, she just jumped on what she feels is popular, and there's no independence there. It's like, hey, these guys will pay me to come out and dance. And like I said earlier, in this group where she's in this book, we turn down money. We turn down stuff. We say, fuck you. We turn that shit down. We don't care. You have to pay more. You have to give us more. You have to do more for us because my name carries a lot of weight. And she uses the LaVey name, and it's just not right. She got a divorce from Stanton, so it's like, quit using the LaVey name. I don't know why people don't call her on that. She's not...
calling herself Zandora, too. Xander was Anton's middle name.
Right. So she's riffing off that whole thing, but she's sitting there talking shit about Stanton. Puts him down, but uses the name. So I don't see that as satanic. I see that as desperate. And so that's how I feel about her and that stuff right now. And that's knowing her pretty well. I do know her pretty well. We've done copious amounts of cocaine in the bathroom at one time and half naked. So I know Zandora, and I will let you know that I really do respect her. I did. But now recently I'm like, why? Why are you doing this? You're just killing your legacy. All of this stuff. Like, I would have more respect for her if she's like formerly known as Zandora LaVey and she comes out with a new name and she's doing that stuff. I would have more respect for her, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Because, take them as enemies. Take Stanton as an enemy and shit, drop that name. Why hold it? It's like, that's weird.
It is. Culture vulture.
Yeah. Culture vulture. That's what you asked me something before about that. Yeah, that's what the Parfry people are. That's what Parfry is. That's what Goad is. That's what the fucking Partridge Family is. Yeah, well, you asked me about that yesterday, and that's exactly what I forgot to use that word today. Culture vulture. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right, the next precursor here is one that I absolutely adore. Kenneth Anger.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've never had the privilege of meeting him. I would love to. I think he's a real cool guy. But again, his influence, when I study his stuff, I'm like, oh, I've seen this 100 times, this movie, but I've never seen it. Because he's influenced so many people that it's trickled down to a point that his name is no longer associated with his influence. It's like Crowley. It's like LaVey. Their influence is so huge, no one realizes it's them. That's big. That's amazing. That's God to me. So he's a God. That's a God to me. When your influence is so mighty, your hammer strikes and it reverberates around the world for hundreds of years and no one understands where that shake's coming from. They just feel it. That's a God to me. And so, yeah, I think he's like a God, like a Crowley and like a LaVey. And so that's how I see him. Yeah.
Kids, the representation of gay men in cinema, you can thank Kenneth Anger for that as well. He he brought gay sexuality into his films, and also the Lucifer Rising. So there's this image that you can find everywhere on the internet now. I actually have a patch that says Satan with these rainbow colors of panels. That rainbow panels comes from Lucifer Rising.
Yes, it does. Right. That comes from that. Exactly. That's what it's riffed off of. Yeah. And I don't even know if those patch makers know that it's from him. That's what I'm saying. His influence reverberates to the point no one puts a name to it anymore. And I think some of his style, even the editing, the filmmaking, the unrepentant sexuality and homosexuality at that was just huge. Yeah, it was big deal. It was very controversial when he made it. Like, I remember hearing about him and I'm like, what year was this? My goodness, because me growing up in the streets of Chicago, I saw gay people getting beat up for being gay and having to fight back and putting the pink triangles on. So it was like, man, Kenneth Anger must have really been dodging bullets. What a courageous filmmaker. You know, that's how I see a
He
lot
was
of
courageous,
book.
definitely, just like Crowley, just like LaVey.
Yeah.
He sort of is a sort of one of those missing links of occultists of kind of like Order of the Solar Temple, Order of those kind of Crowley adjacent, and he's sort of a last generation of that as well. So we're kind of fortunate he's still alive. Good for him.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
for you, old man.
Yeah.
We love you, old man.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, exactly.
Another one, Robert Williams. Who is Robert Williams?
Oh, he's a great underground artist. He's one of the best. He's in there just by default, I guess, because George knows him. But Robert is a big deal underground artist, lowbrow culture, very much pushed it. And I hung out with like Crumb is my friend, Jay Lynch did the Garbage Pail Kids. But these people really pushed it. I mean, their artwork in the 60s, you know, they call them comics, but they weren't. They were art. It was art books that were unfortunately called comics because they were just so heavy. They were talking about drug use, fucking, every little thing that we're talking about today, they were talking about way back then when they had to dodge bullets. And I think that's one of the unifying factors in this book. Everyone in here, whether you like them or not, is putting out something that's unpopular that could get them hurt or killed. And Robert Williams back in the day was probably one of those people, even though he was to a lesser degree than like a Crumb and other people, which really pushed it.
He has a very like bulging eyeballs, I think of, and things getting zapped kind of thing. And you see a lot of reverberance of that in the 1980s as well. That's highly influenced by him.
When I see him in this book, I don't feel like he belongs. I feel like George only used him for a name.
Yes.
Because his stuff is, maybe it was shocking back then, but it's still, he's not our Crumb did shocking stuff. Our Crumb did politically biting stuff. Robert Williams is a fine art artist. He gets hundreds of thousands of dollars for a painting. He's in museums, and he's respected, and in his lifetime. So I don't really see him fitting in the book, but I get that he's part of a culture that does fit into this timeline that were my mentors. I was mentored by Crumb, or Jay Lynch was a friend of mine, or those people, the Chicago stuff like that, the Chicago 7, Abbie Hoffman, all those people were influential in my life.
The next one is another ubiquitous to almost everybody in this book is Charles Manson. Charles Manson was part of everyone's childhood, I'm guessing, from this book, because...
Yeah, I think, but some people really clung to some of his ideas, and they all, and I noticed we all interpret them differently. And he's another person who's like a god, like, because his influence is reverberating around the planet and people don't know where it comes from. But he had a mighty influence coming from a nowhere zip code, from abuse, rape. He was raped as a child. He came from a hard life. And I didn't take his stuff, like a lot of people took him as racist and stuff like that. I only heard a person speaking like I speak, like he wasn't educated formally, but he was really fucking smart. And he was pushing these philosophical things like outlaw, air, tree, water, animals, the most important thing in the world to protect, outlaw. So that is a cool concept that is basically Greta, the young lady that's coming to, that's fighting for the environment now, is basically an outlaw member, air, tree, water, animals. That's something that Manson was pushing back then. His concern was that, and a lot of people back then, there was a lot of bombs going off back then. There was like today we don't set bombs, but back then there was hundreds of bombs going off with these kind of revolutionary people, like a Manson. There was murders, there was all that stuff, because they were part of the prophecy that we're sitting there going, we told you so. He was part of that prophecy, and he decided to do it in a violent way. He decided to act out in a violent way. Even though I know Nicholas Schreck debates that and, says it's just these pathetic crimes, there was a lot more happening there than that, or he wouldn't have had the followers like he had, I think. So.
All right.
But like James Mason took him as a, racist.
James Mason took him, I feel like he's kind of one of the most responsible people for making him this figure amongst racists.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he misunderstood it, I think.
Oh,
definitely.
A man who has an arrest record of stealing a car to go be racist to black people, definitely.
Yeah, that's his interpretation of everything. It's racist, or they're out to get me. But I've talked to people who are family members, Manson family members, stuff like that, and I've asked them about that stuff. They're like, no way. We were about love. We were about free love. They were hippies. They were like about taking drugs and the air and the water and caring for the planet and all this stuff. It was like that's what they were into, and they were they were for class war, and they felt they could bring it on through what they would call race war. They felt that was the wedge issue, that they could create violence. And to this day, now you see it with football. The Kaepernick, you see, well, Manson was right. The race issue is a wedge issue, huge, where people of privilege like myself might not see that, but you see it.
Another courageous man here is John Waters.
Oh, yeah. He's in the book.
Yeah, he's
God,
a precursor.
I missed that.
And he's definitely a precursor there. There's, Portrait of American Family at the end has that, like, go home to your mother. This is no communist daycare. Tell her I hate you or whatever. That's a John Waters film. There's plenty of John Waters in these artists.
I absolutely. I just didn't know he was in the book. I read through it last night. I didn't see it. I wonder if it's in a different. He's in that printing and he's not in this printing, or I just missed it. That's amazing. We have to talk off the air about that one. But yeah, John Waters, of course, he influenced me. Absolutely, he's a big deal. He like I said in the Dorothea Puente episode that we did a couple shows ago, that he buys the Dorothea Puente cookbook from me every Christmas, a couple dozen of them, and gives them out. So I love him, and I love when he speaks in interviews. I think he's an artwork of prophecy. He's prophetic.
H.R. Giger is the next one, and perhaps yours doesn't have it. So in your...
Those are precursors in yours, right?
Yes.
Oh, they're not in mine. Great.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. So yeah, Giger is the next one. I think Giger is another one that if just anyone looked at this book, Giger and Marilyn Manson probably stand out the most to others. But even so, a lot of people still to this day don't know who he is unless you say alien. And then they're like, oh yeah.
Well, I was introduced to Giger through Frankenpenis.
Yes.
That he did for the dead Kennedys and Jello Biafra, and it got Jello Biafra arrested. They busted into his place, confiscated all of his records, all based on Giger. I don't know. That's fine.
Genesis Peorage is the next precursor mentioned. We talked a little about him. He's kind of a Crowley, too. He's a little bit of a Crowley.
Yeah, his influence definitely reverberates. I don't know if it's as big as someone like
Kenneth Anger,
but he's still around. It's still to be seen.
Well, how about this? A lot of I think he was very ahead of his time as an occultist, considering the push within Satanism is going toward a lot of in favor of a lot of transgender people now, and he was a little ahead of his time of being a gender bender, and now he has his own term. I don't remember what it is.
Certainly, but to put him at the level of LaVey, Crowley, Kenneth Anger, I don't think
he's there. I don't think he's there.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But he's a great artist. Like, I respect him for everything he's done. Like, I think he's a real deal artist. Like, he sculpted his body even. So he's off the hizzy. He's the shit for sure. He's the real deal.
Definitely. The final two, the next one being Monty Kazaza. Are you familiar with Monty Kazaza?
No, Monty Kazaza. And I'm going to look in my book. Oh, yeah, I saw it in this book. I don't know who he is, really. I looked him up last night, and I guess I think he's a friend of George. I guess he came up with the name Industrial. music or something like that, industrial music
yes,
for industrial
yes.
people. So I didn't know who he is, but again, he's one of these people where his influence has reverberated to a point that you don't realize it's him. You know, when you say the name industrial music. Same with like punk rock. No one knows that came from John Sinclair, but it did.
And finally, Harley Flannigan / Cro-Mags.
Oh yeah,
Who
I
is
do
this?
love Harley Flannigan. Was a young. He grew up in the scene. He grew up as a punk kid. What's that guy? Geez, I forgot the guy who did Howl. Fuck. Poet that did Howl wrote an introduction to a book that Harley wrote as a child. Allen Ginsberg.
Yes.
And so he knew Allen Ginsberg. He has such an interesting life, Harley. You know, and he's a true artist. I love the story. You know, that motherfucker, check this out. So he's fighting over the Cro-Mags name and all this stuff. And you know, like John Joseph went and took the Cro-Mags to a really stupid level and does Cro-Mags shows without Harley. And Harley's the one who did it, came up with it. And Harley goes like, this is like, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years ago. He went to a Cro-Mags show and he went backstage, and there's stories all over that, but the couple people that were in the Cro-Mags got stabbed by him. Like he went in there and fucking went to fight, and they went to fight him. He pulled out a knife and cut some people and got thrown out of there and had to go to court and stuff like that. But he didn't go to jail. Like, I was like, God damn, how did he get out of that? Like, New York, I guess motherfuckers get stabbed all the time there, and you can walk, you know? But I think I really respect Harley, for certain.
And it's another person that lived the life. It wasn't someone putting on a costume and playing along as a tourist.
Right, and I can guarantee you, like, Harley Flannigan, every black metal band knows who Harley Flannigan is and has Age of Quarrel. Everyone that was hardcore underground has that record. So that's what he represents to me, his influence. Like the black metal bands of today or my day definitely know who Harley Flannigan is.
All right. We have come to the closing of this episode. Is there anything we didn't cover regarding this book that you'd like to talk about?
Oh boy, I'm sure I can keep going on about it. It was a big deal in my life.
I got one. Page 287, the Shane Bugbee page. It's got a so it's a copy of Naked Aggression that's scanned here, and my favorite parts about this says free maybe on the side. Free maybe. And I can hear your voice saying that when I'm reading this, but then it says censor this asshole. So what's up with censor this asshole?
Well, okay, so that zine was hard to print too. The printer, I went to the printer and he ripped it up, the boards. I was like, dude, that's my original artwork. I later on put sugar in all their gas tanks in that printing company and fucked them up. But I couldn't believe that he did that. Like, he ripped up my original artwork. He's like, we're not going to put this out. But it was a message to, well, first, free, maybe the concept there is, are you free? Are you free? Maybe you're free. Maybe you're not. It wasn't like we're looking for money. The zine was free, but are you? So it wasn't phrased the best. Man, there's so many typos in that fucking thing. It's definitely written from a kid who barely has a grade school education, that's for sure. But it was like a reflective of, and that's something I did with Carmi. That was one of the first, when I was talking to you about going to a building and stealing computer time and copy stuff, that was something I did with Carmi. And we didn't have scanners at the time, so they still shot it on film and all this. But Censor This Asshole was about the PMRC. Public music, something like that. And I wrote to Tipper Gore and her letters in the other pages. And so it was my first expose on free speech and what it was. And it was a statement to, like, come on, censor me. And then, like I said, a couple mayors in Illinois and around Chicago were like, pull that magazine or you'll have trouble. So
Censor This Asshole was censor this asshole.
Yeah. Is there not a comma in there? Right.
There is not. So I wasn't sure if you were the asshole in it or if they were the asshole. You're like, censor this asshole, and pointing at yourself.
Right. Well, you see that there's a zine coming from, and you know, when I put that out, here's something that was funny. and maybe it has to do with some of this stuff here. When I put that out, everyone was saying stuff like that, like they're missing a comma. This is spelled wrong. How could you do this? This is awful. Who would put something like this out? And I'm like, someone who feels the need to express themselves that can't spell, I guess. Like I can still have a right to express myself. I don't, fuck you and, fuck you. If you don't get it, anyone that was of my ilk got it. Okay. So maybe your education is holding you back from the cool shit here in the underground, in the sewers of the world. You're not you, but you get it. But you know what I'm saying? The general you.
Great art often is debated like this, though. And a lot of times artwork and film, etc., you'll have happy accidents in there that make people talk about it. And this is a good example of it, that here we are talking about it. Here I was pondering censor this asshole for like 2 weeks now. I've had this book.
That's so funny. As I think about that, that's my whole life with this my whole career is like, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be doing this. Like when that zine was put out, there were people really upset because I was doing it. I wasn't educated, but I had the will to do it. I have a huge will. So my will overcame all those, my will and my naivete. And it's still like to this day, I shouldn't be talking at Harvard. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be publishing books. I shouldn't be. You're a publisher. Oh my goodness. It's like when I went to Seattle once, I was like, the guy's like, you want to get some sausage? And I'm like, no, I want a hunk of salmon. And he's like, can you believe this? This guy wants salmon. He doesn't want to eat a sausage. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like. This is a weird conversation just altogether.
This is a very Seinfeld-like thing to say to someone.
It is. My life is a fucking, that's right. I relate to dude in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Larry David.
I relate to Larry David's life because I was like, what? Like, I couldn't be sophisticated enough to want anything more than a fucking hot dog because I'm from Chicago on this low end, whatever people see, because I don't feel low end. I got royal blood, motherfucker. Like, I want truffle salt. I want truffles on my hamburger. Fucking shave, make it rain truffle. But
can you believe this guy? He doesn't like sausage. I should knock his block off.
Right. That's how it is. Like, what the fuck, man? I can like the finer things. How dare you?
So, my last question to you is, the true motivation of the artists of the underground, including yourself, seem to be different. What do you think the majority of the artists were ultimately out there to, I guess, what was their ultimate motivation?
I think like careers like Jim Goad were out for money, stuff like that. Like the Partridge Family, stuff like that. But not for me. Like I was out there to punch people. I was out there to cause problems. I was out there to cause violence. I wanted to see the world burn, and no doubt about it. Like, and I want to practically apologize for that, but I can't. You should apologize to me, people, not you, Nannerl. But the general public should be apologizing to people who are so angry that they want to watch the world burn. What the fuck did you do wrong? Not me. I didn't do anything wrong by having feelings. As I say today, my feelings are valid. It's okay to be angry. And I like that part of today's culture, okay? Because we didn't have that then. They told us our anger was bad. We were bad because we had feelings. But no, I have feelings. And my feelings are that, you didn't do enough for us. Or something's wrong in the society. This is a reflection of you, not me. I'm doing the heavy lifting. I'm holding up this huge, heavy mirror of 30 years. It's fucking heavy. And no one wants to give a hand. They want to look at it and throw rocks at it. They don't want to see the reflection. But this is the reflection that the world created. And I think that's part of this Art That Kills book is it's a reflection of society. Marilyn Manson's a great reflection of society. The stuff I put out was all put out because it reflected society. It was ugly truth, ugly fucking truth. But it was true in our zip codes. This is what we lived through. And if you're of privilege, you are doing this for the money, maybe. You're looking to climb up on things, stuff like that. But or you're able to judge us in a way that you don't understand us without understanding. And I think like we were talking about before, like control, like the idea of some people, half of us were courageous and we wanted no control. We wanted to quit being controlled. Leave us alone. I want fucking schooling. I don't want to have to say, I can't afford schooling. I can't afford dental care. So we wanted that stuff, and we wanted things uncontrolled. We wanted to be free. And then the other half of us had the same kind of motivation, which was fear. But our fear, we became courageous. And some people stayed with fear and they wanted control, or fascism. So there's the anarchy part of our group and the fascist part of our group. And I think the fascist people just would not evolve out of the fear. And the anarchists are the intellectuals. They're the ones that evolve out of the fear and say, you know, we're going to get courageous here and we're going to do what thou wilt.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune in to our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit ShaneBugbee.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugbee. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and ShaneIsTheDevil.com.